So we've been going through, we had two sections. One which was about the power of a mitzvah, and how when you do a mitzvah, that actually creates a home for God right here in the lowest realms. And we go along for that ride and become holy like the patriarchs and matriarchs for that moment. Then the Alter Rebbe flipped and said, but you can't do just the mitzvah dry physically, even though that's the key component, that's the core, you still have to add your emotions to it, what we call kavanah. And he described kavanah in general as love and awe, or love and respect. And that allows the mitzvah, the home for God, to be filled with light and to elevate and unite with godliness in various worlds. So you can go back and review that. Then starting in chapter 41, the Alter Rebbe starts to now zoom in on exactly what he means by kavanah. As we said, every class for the past while, kavanah, although we use it sometimes to mean general intention, general focus, or even just mindfulness in general, that I'm not on automatic. In Kabbalah, kavanah doesn't mean general mindfulness. It means mindfulness creating emotions while attached to a mitzvah or Torah learning. So kavanah is a much more technical term, which you have to start with either what we're doing now, learning Torah, or any kind of mitzvah. It's all through the day. As Jews, we're doing mitzvahs all the time. The more we know about them, the more we recognize just being kind to another person when you feel crabby is a mitzvah, right? I mean, you do mitzvahs all the time, so your day can be full with them, even if you're not, living a life full of ritual moments. So you attach it to a mitzvah, and then you engage your respect or awe, your yira, and then you engage your ahava, your love. And when you have those two emotions engaged, connected to that mitzvah, now that mitzvah is elevated and unites with godliness in various worlds. So kavanah is really a practice that requires all those components. And we said in chapter 41, of those two, one of them is foundational. Which one is foundational? Awe, yira, right? So we know that now. So when I'm working with both these wings as a practitioner of Kabbalah and the Tanya, I want to know that if I haven't gotten that very basic level of respect or awe activated, then really the love is not the best quality of love that it can be. That we need the awe first for the love to be the highest form of love. So the love is built on a foundation of awe or of respect. And then we went through and we got a beautiful meditation that I hope people are using, where in fact every day I wake up and sometime before I pray I sit and I imagine how great the Ein Sof is, how the Ein Sof fills all the world, and the Ein Sof is looking right at me saying, Michael, I need you to serve me. And as if I'm literally standing in front of a great ruler, and the sense of respect and the high level functioning I be at, knowing that there's eyes on me, that I want to have that meditation, and that'll cause me to have a basic level of awe, of reverence. And secondly, we want to start flowing with love. And there we had, in addition to our meditation, not just thinking about basically I love the world, I love the things in it, and God creates that, so I love God, or one step higher, I want to be close to God, so I'm filled with this desire to connect with God. But in fact, whatever I'm doing with love, I should keep in mind that when I connect to God, there's light that comes from God that goes into every single soul. And when I am doing something out of love for God, I'm doing it to connect God with every soul through all the various terms and levels we talked about, but it's not just for me personally. And then various levels within that. So that kind of catches us up where we are. And by the way, let's just, when we're reading, let's just go around, let's just go clockwise. Okay, that'll be our thing. So if you want to grab the mic to start, you can take it right out of the, Dan, can you do that for me? Just grab it out and start being passed around. And Gina will tell us if the levels are good. Yeah, so yeah, don't be worried. You just kind of hold it there.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing?
This is Eleanor.
So we're going to start chapter 42. 42 goes into something the Alter Rebbe touched on, right? Because we've been looking at first Yira and then Chesed. But to get both Yira and Chesed flowing, you need something else. And if you learn Kabbalah with us, you know what it is. What is the precursor in the Sfirot, or in the to Yira and Chesed? Where do Yira and Chesed, where do Chesed and Gvura come from? Yeah? What's that? Dot. Thank you. Good dot. So we know, right? If you've gone through with us, and you can look at Intro to Kabbalah, dot is the third component of our intellect, right? You have Chokhmah, Bina, and dot, and within dot is contained already all the emotions of Chesed and Gevurah, and even their offshoots. So for me to get this awe and love flowing, if my dot is not engaged, it's just never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Not for something abstract. I will love brownies, I will love naps, I will love, Broadway shows, but to love something abstract, to engage my divine soul, to have love for an abstract entity like Ein Sof that I can't see, there I need dot of my divine soul to be engaged. And he said on 604, he said, you should intend that the attribute of dot, which includes both chesed and gevurah, be nullified and absorbed in the attribute of the higher knowledge, dot elyon, which comprises kindness, etc., etc. So he just touched on it in 41, that in order to get this kavanah, this awe and love flowing, I need my dot to be connected to dot elyon. I need my dot to be focused on the infinite, and that will allow my emotions to also be focused on the abstract and make them real to me emotionally. 42 takes that little idea and it expands it and goes deep, deep into it. And you'll see where we go. And he's going to start with a question. Let's go inside the text, and then we'll see. It's a very, very evident question, and the answer I think you'll find inspiring. So we're in chapter 42 of the Tanya. V'hineh b'ma shnitba'er le'el b'inyan yira tata'a. Go ahead, Eleanor. You want to, if you hold the mic up. Yeah, right there.
Okay. In the light of what has already been said on the subject of the lower level of fear as summarized above.
Gina, that's coming through. We're good? Excellent work. See, there's your mic technique. So you just want to take it and hold it somewhere near and then pass it to the next person. Good. So in light of what's been said above about the lower level of fear, that is the starting point for service, that's the starting point for kavanah, and that in fact you need da'at to be connected to da'at elyon for that fear to engage. Yuvan hetev ma shekatuv b'gemara al pasuk ve'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach ki im liyira et Hashem Elokecha atu yira milta zutartihi.
One will clearly understand the Talmudic comment on the verbs. And now, Israel, what does the Lord, your God, require of you? Only that you fear the Lord, your God. The Gemara asks, is fear then such a small thing?
So it's from the Gemara, right, from Brachot. And it says, what does God ask from you? Only just that you fear God. That's all. That's all. No big deal. Not a big demand. All I need, you guys, everyone can just fear me and that'll satisfy me, right? So easy, right? And then the Gemara asks, well, hold on. That's all we need to do? I mean, if you'd said, I demand of every person you have to work hard and get to the level where you're going to fear God, and I require that of every Jew. Okay, I get that. It's going to take work. But if someone says to me, this is all I need. This is all I need. Just that you fear God, right? This is all I need, Michael. I just need you to come up with $1 million by tomorrow. No big deal. That's all I need. That's what kind of a frame is that? What do you mean, only that you fear God? Is it such a small thing? Is it natural to us to fear something abstract? Right? I mean, there's a truck on the highway. I have respect for that when I'm passing that. I have fear for that. But the fact that God is always there looking at every thought, every action, every emotion that I have, is that natural to fear that? That's a small thing? It seems like that's something that requires a lot of work to retrain myself. So how is it a small thing? Make sense? And we can talk, right? We can have a conversation. Does it seem normal? You follow the question? Good.
Answers the Gemara, yes. In the case of Moses, it is a small thing, and so forth.
Now here's the answer, and this is the focus of this chapter. And it's a huge, huge piece for us to understand. The Gemara says, you can leave it on the table, it's good. It says, yes, it was a small thing. You know why it was a small thing? It was a small thing for Moses. For Moses feared God like that. Moses came out of the cradle fearing God. Moses couldn't stand watching anything happening in the world that went against God's will. He had no fear of anything else. Right? Here he's beating a slave master in Egypt, knowing that he could be, you know, strung up and killed, and just he had to do it no matter what, right? So for Moses, it was a small thing. Let me ask you, does that answer our problem? Why not? We're not Moses, right? So it's like, what are you talking about? Okay, so I'm saying, just fear God. That's all I need you all to do. And we say, well, how is that a small thing? And the Gemara answers, well, it was a small thing for Moses. So now the problem is bigger, because for Moses it was a small thing, but Moses was talking to us. Moses was instructing each one of us. So if it's a small thing for Moses, how does that help me? Because I'm not Moses. So the Alter Rebbe will point out that problem. Dilichora eno muvan haterutz deha shoel meimach ktiv.
At first glance, the answer of the Gemara is incomprehensible, for the verse asks, what does God require of you? That is, what does God require of every Jew? For the majority of Jews, fear of God is certainly no mean accomplishment. What then is the point of answering that for Moses, it is a simple thing?
And we'll do one more, and then we'll go into it. Ela ha'inyan hu ki kol nefesh v'nefesh mi Beit Yisrael yesh ba מבחינת Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom ki hu mishiva ro'im.
The explanation, however, is as follows. Each and every soul of the house of Israel comprises within it something of the quality of our teacher Moses, peace unto him, for he is one of the 7 shepherds.
So let's stop there. Let's go into it. So every one of us has something of Moses within us, has sort of an array for Moses within us. And what is Moses? There's a term called the 7 shepherds. It's Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aharon, Yosef, and David. So the same as in Sukkot, you have these 7 ushpizim that come into the sukkah. Those are also called the 7 shepherds. And they correspond, each one of them, to the 7 midot, which is the 7 divine emotions, if you will, but also the 7 emotional traits within me, including Malchut, right? So you go through Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Avraham is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gvura, and so on. Moshe has a special quality because Moshe includes all of them. Moshe includes all of them. So along with Moshe being one of the shepherds, Moshe is also the source of how we connect to every one of the other shepherds. And that's why, as the Alter Rebbe will say, Moshe is called the shepherd of faith. The shepherd of faith, because faith is where it all starts, and now that leads to dot focus that allows us to connect to all the other midot. And so because Moses has this quality, where Moses dot was just completely one with dot in Atzilus, which as we'll see was completely united with God, for Moses dot was just automatic, focus was just automatic, and every one of us has a little energy from that shining within us. And if we can get in touch with our inner Moses, now our dot can be connected to dot Elyon, and automatically, well, we'll see with some work, not automatically, but within us, there is the power for us to be focused on something abstract until the point that it becomes real. And we should review what is dot, because we're using this term, and there may be some people watching or here that aren't clear. Dot, which means knowledge, it's often translated as knowledge, right? Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge are chokhmah, bina, and dot, the 3 intellectual midot. But it's not really knowledge like you'd say in English, which means, you know, I know geography, so I have knowledge. Dot is more about connecting to the knowledge, emotionally connecting to the knowledge so that it's part of me and real to me. So dot is used the first time in the Torah. We say Adam knew Eve, right? Adam knew Eve. It's not some cute term because the Torah is afraid to say they had sex. You know, the Torah talks about everything. It really says something deep about what dot is, what this intellectual midah is. It's about connecting to something until you're one thing. Until you're one thing. So we told this story a long time ago. There was and this talks about dot, right? There was in Europe, in Eastern Europe, when we were very poor and it was tough times, often families couldn't even read because they were just working all day and just providing enough to survive. And so they had to find teachers to teach their children. And And they couldn't just bring one teacher to a town. They were scattered around. So they hired one teacher for an area, and different towns would bring their kids to that teacher, and they'd all learn from that teacher. So that was the setup. And one day, one of the villagers got a letter, and because they were illiterate, I mean, they were very devout Jews and prayed and knew the prayers and knew psalms by heart, but they couldn't read. They brought it to the teacher because the teacher was the one who could read. And of course, this is a bit of an event. Oh, a letter came, someone's come, so a crowd gathers around. The teacher opens the letter, and God forbid anyone should get news. It was terrible news that the parent of this villager had passed away. The parent of this villager had died. And so the teacher read the contents of the letter, and then the son that had that was hearing the letter broke down and was crying and had to be consoled and everything you could imagine, God forbid. Now, if I'm watching this, I might say something strange is going on here. The teacher is the one that understands how to read and is connected more closely to the letter, right? The teacher has that information. The teacher was the one that actually shared the contents of the letter with that person. So why wasn't the teacher affected when the teacher really had just much more involved knowledge of reading and of the information and the nuances and the handwriting? How come the teacher was unaffected, whereas this illiterate person was so deeply affected by a letter they couldn't even read? How's it possible? The answer is, and it's silly to even ask the question because we all know the answer is dat. Das, as you'll hear in Hasidus. Because when I'm disconnected from information, it has no emotional impact. And I can fill my mind with information, more and more and more, but unless dat is activated, it's just going to stay intellectual. It won't affect me as a person. If I have dat flowing powerfully, which of course if it's your parents, if it's your life, now dat is engaged. Now just the tiniest bit of information, it fills me with awe or love or whatever my reaction is, but it changes me, it affects me. So of course, the teacher felt bad reading the news, but the teacher, it wasn't his life, so he wasn't affected. Whereas the villager, who had very little knowledge, was deeply affected because of dat. And when the last Rebbe of this system tells the story, he finishes by saying, and when you learn this text, when you learn Hasidus like we're learning, don't learn it like the teacher who's sharing information. It's not being affected. Learn it like the child for whom every piece of information is deeply about yourself and affects you. That's what we're trying to get at here. We're trying to say, if I want to have true kavanah when I'm doing things and be engaged and elevate my Torah and my mitzvahs, I have to take it personally, and everything is about me such that it affects me. So that's what dat. Dat is me connecting to this information so I have emotions. Yes, Eleanor? You want to grab the mic so everybody can hear? Thanks. We're learning new habits here. It's a new setup, so.
So we're putting emotions into dat when the emotional sivot were below dat. Is that true?
So that's a good question. So you phrased it, we're putting emotions into dat, but dat, the emotions flow after dat. So it's a little even simpler than what you're saying. Dat is the precursor for Chesed and Gevurah, and Chesed and Gevurah contained within dat incipient. The incipient emotions are within dat. So everything you're going to feel comes from what you focus on intellectually, right? If you don't think about something, it's not going to cause any feelings. And it's dat within your intellect that already contains the emotions that will expand into genuine midot, right? So, yeah, we're not putting them there. That's where they come from. That's their source. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah?
I would want to have emotions for the person that received the information before feeling emotions for myself as if I was the person having that information. Like, is that...
So you say you'd want to first be like the teacher and then be like the child of the... What do you mean?
No. I would feel that I couldn't feel the emotions that that person felt truthfully because it didn't happen to me. I could be sympathetic or empathetic, but I couldn't feel it exactly the same.
Right. So that's
Okay.
the same point I'm making, right?
Okay.
If I don't see this as something where it's my parent that's at stake, then I'm not going to feel those emotions, right?
No, I want to feel an emotion for the person who does have it as their parent. I want to have some empathy for them beyond feeling it.
Yeah, so yeah, in the story, if I'm the person reading the letter, I'm going to be sympathetic, and if you're a feeling person, you're like, oh my God, this is terrible, and of course, I might shed a tear also. Just, is that what you mean?
Yes, like I want to respect the fact that they've had a loss.
Yeah, so of course, I'm not in my story, the teacher wasn't, just like chuck, but the teacher didn't break down. I think in the original story, the villager fainted was what it was. I left that out.
Okay.
So, everyone hearing this was like, oh, that's so sad, and felt emotions, but only the villager fainted from this and was so deeply affected that. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can you tell us more about those 7 shepherds? I don't know too much about those. You're saying that Moses was the king of Dot. He was the one who had Dot all the time.
I mean, there's two aspects, right? So if you have, I'd love to put this up on the screen now if we're going to go deep into it, but I can't. But if you have Chesed, Gevur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchut, and you line up, each of these, here you go. Can we get a camera shot of this? I don't know, we probably can't. And you move, yeah. Oh, good. So if you know those midot, and you line up the names of the 7 shepherds on them, each one represents their midah as it comes down to each of us. So a shepherd is someone that feeds the flock, makes sure they're fed, and each one of these shepherds makes sure that each one of us gets that midah. So if you're looking for Gevura, that comes from Yitzchak, and Yitzchak, even now as a soul in heaven, is feeding every one of our souls with that midah of Gevura. Does that make sense? So that would be Tiferet. So Moshe really is at the level of Netzach, and directly Moshe is connecting us to Netzach. But because Moshe is responsible for connecting us to all the others, Moshe is also called Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of faith. So there's 2 levels Moshe is working at, and that's why it's a bit confusing. But the 7 shepherds and 7 midot, each one of them is a shepherd for their midah, and Avraham, as we speak often, sends a flow of chesed to each of us such that we have this deep love for God within us. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Okay, let's go back in. Teach us. הממשיכים חיות ואלוקות לכללות נמשות ישראל שלכן נקראים בשם רועים.
Who cause vitality and godliness to flow to the community of the souls of Israel, for which reason they are called shepherds.
All right, so I might think, I'm just me, and I'm doing this work, and I'm trying to connect to godliness, and the more I work, the more I connect with God, and that's wonderful. And I have these midot that correspond to the sfirot. I understand that. But, Moses and Yitzchak, these are just, people in the Torah that are inspiring. Here we're learning something brand new. There actually is a chain of connection between every single Jewish person and every one of the midot, and that is through their shepherd. And ultimately, the source of that midah in me is through that great soul. That's why they're called shepherds. And for the purposes of our chapter, Moshe, we really need to understand, and we'll look at it on many levels, that I can learn, I can focus, I can work on general mindfulness, but if I want to really have awareness of godliness in my practice and not just be learning language and ritual moments and the way Jews behave, ultimately I need to connect somehow to Moses so that I engage that dot within me, because that's where it's coming from. It really is that's the portal for all of us. And it's there no matter what. I may not be conscious of that, and I'm still drawing from it. It's there. But if I'm conscious of it, that becomes my focus when I'm meditating. Now it's clearer, and I can really draw in a more powerful way. Yeah, let's make sure everybody online can hear you.
Okay. Last week, you discussed the word vitality, and it really meant something to me. And I noticed that they used it again in this little paragraph we read.
Yeah.
And that's bringing life to the world, or light to the world. Is that how it was explained last week?
So kind of vitality and light often use them for the same thing. But yeah, of course, it's divine will that brings all vitality to the whole universe. So I say, this cup exists, it has vitality, it has beingness, and its beingness is that somewhere in God's infinite intellect of every detail, God wants there to be this paper cup here right now. What its purpose, I don't know. Maybe just for me to make a blessing and drink, maybe to explain a piece of Torah, maybe for me to recycle it and take care of the world. But the fact that it's here means that Ratzon Elyon is interested in this cup, and so that's the soul of this cup on a nefesh level, right? You can also call that vitality, so the life force of this cup.
Well, I just find it interesting that they take a word like vitality and put a really deeper meaning into it. So, like we change fear to awe, we change.
Yeah.
So every time I see it, a bright light comes on.
Good. I'm glad that word speaks. Yeah. And of course,
I have another question. You were talking about the shepherds being connected to the Midot, or the Sephirot.
Yeah.
Are the archangels also connected?
They're more related, right? So you have Gabriel and Michael, and this is a tangent, so let's do quickly. So Michael is on the side of Chesed, and is the sort of the channel through which Chesed comes through to the world, and same thing with Gabriel. But they're not the source of it in us, right? So it's like there's the wire through which the electricity is flowing, and that's the angelic system, where they're just the nervous system, but the generator where the power is coming from, now that's the actual shepherds. Good. And over the page, Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom hu klalut kulam nikra raya mehemna dahinu she mamshich b'chinat hadat nichlalut Yisrael leda et Hashem. Go ahead, Eleanor. Yeah, thanks.
Our teacher Moses, peace unto him, comprises aspects of them all, and he is called the faithful shepherd. This means that he draws down the quality of dat to the community of Israel, that they may know and be cognizant of God, so that for them godliness will be served, evident and experienced by every Jew, will be self-evident and experienced by every Jew.
Yeah, so this idea of dat, connection to information, which is the whole key of this chapter. We said Moshe is Raya Mehemna, is the faithful shepherd, and Moshe, we have a little mini Moshe in each of us. And once we engage that, now what happens is all these abstract concepts that we're looking at, all these lofty concepts we're trying to integrate, they can become as real as, like we said, as a truck on the highway, or as real as my retirement plan. Right? I mean, I look at my retirement plan. I'm not gonna toss it into. I'm looking at Rick there, right? I'm not gonna toss it into some what's some crazy venture capital thing. I might, Bitcoin. All right, now we're gonna start a big debate online about Bitcoin. I don't know. I think there's millionaires that will argue with you, but it's volatile, right? So you would not put your whole investment into Bitcoin, because God forbid it crashes, and then that's how I'm gonna support myself in my retirement, right? It's real to me. If I'm passing a truck, I'm not going to just cut it off without thinking. I'm not going to check, that the driver's not on their phone, because I know that truck, God forbid something goes wrong, that's real. Dat, through the mini Moshenas, that's what's going to make all these concepts as real to me as something physical that I actually see. And to talk about dat a little more, look at two little pieces so we really know what we're talking about. When a child becomes bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, that's a stage where they become responsible for what they do. Until then, their parents are responsible. Now, there's lots of children that are much smarter than lots of adults, right? I'm sure Einstein, as an 8-year-old, could run laps and laps and laps around me intellectually. Even if I spent the rest of my life educating myself, I just couldn't keep up, right? There's lots of children that are much smarter. Should they be bar mitzvah early? And if I'm not so smart, right, and there's kids smarter than me, should I be bar mitzvah late because, I don't understand it all? Bar mitzvah is not about a level of understanding. Bar mitzvah is about dat now lands, and it's real. So talking about a retirement plan, I might have a very, very bright child that loves economics, studies economics, understands retiring, understands the ins and outs of everything around investing much better than me. Some prodigy? I'm from Canada, so I say that in French. Prodigy. But if I give that child $5, what are they going to do? They're not going to go save it. They're going to go buy themselves a pack of gum and some magic cards or something, right? They're just going to fritter it away because they understand the information about saving, but it hasn't landed. It's not personal. So in the end, it's not going to affect them, and their behavior is still going to be such that they're not really responsible for what they do. They just might be clever and have the information. Once you hit bar bat mitzvah, now it's different. Now it starts to become personal, and the information they've learned will affect or should affect how they behave. And there's another more fun story about a chassid called Reb Shmuel Munkus, who's this a very profound person, but and a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, but a real comic, a real cut-up. There's stories of him like hanging from the Alter Rebbe's doorway upside down, because this isn't the story, but it just occurred to me, because they were going by the Alter Rebbe's house and they saw Shmuel Munkus hanging upside down from the Alter Rebbe's like awning or whatever it was. Like, are you crazy? What are you doing? You could break your neck. And he said, well, you know, the tailor has a sign saying I make suits, and the bootmaker has a sign hanging saying I make boots, while the Alter Rebbe makes chassidim. So I wanted him to have a sign saying he makes chassidim. So I'm hanging from his this kind of guy, right? So he was traveling to see the Alter Rebbe in the thick of winter in Russia, and he's walking along. You know, he probably could have gotten a horse, and they'd ask him like, why don't you get a horse to go there? He's like, I don't want a horse to come when I'm in heaven and argue they should get a share of my mitzvah of going to see the Alter Rebbe, because I don't want to have to argue with a horse in heaven. Who needs to deal with that? I mean, I could probably argue him out of his share, but I don't want to have to argue with a horse in heaven. It's this kind of guy. So he's walking, but it's very, very cold, and he's shivering, and then a horse and wagon pulls by, and the driver says, where are you going? He says, here. He says, I'm going the same direction, hop on. So fine, he hops on, but there's no room in the actual carriage. He has to sit in the back, and the back is full of big containers of mashke, of like, you know, probably vodka, of alcohol. So now he's sitting, but because he's not walking, he's even colder. So he's shivering as they're going along in this horrible Russian winter, and he's so cold, he says, I'm being upstaged by birds. Is that what's going on? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Oh, it did. In theater, they say don't go on stage with a baby or an animal. So there you go. So he's finally on the back of a wagon, and he's cold, and he knocks on the front. He says, hey, you got all this mashke. Can I get a little cup to warm me up? The guy says, sure, help yourself. No worries. So the guy, you know, Shmuel Munkus takes a little cup and pours himself a little bit of mashke and drinks it, and now he's all warm, and he's comfortable, and he's in a better mood, and they go on their journey. And so he remarked to his friends when he got to the Alter Rebbe's house, said, you know, it's funny, I was sitting in the back of this wagon with barrels and barrels full of mashke, of vodka, and yet I was shivering cold. It didn't help me at all. I had no way of warming myself up, even sitting with all these barrels. But the tiniest cup of that mashke, when I put it inside myself, now I was warm and I was happy, and it changed me. And that's the same thing here. It's the same thing with das, that you can fill your mind up with chapters and chapters and chapters of the Tanya and Torah and other information, but if it doesn't go in, it's not going to warm me up. It's not going to change me. It's das that takes it from being a barrel I'm sitting next to being a cup that I put inside myself that changes me. Some heads are nodding now. This story always gets the point across better than yes.
So Moses is known for his humility.
Yeah.
Right? Does his humility have does it come into play in terms of his ability to have reverence for God and awe for God and be that source of dot?
Yeah, they're directly related, right? So we said that the power of yira, of respect or awe, is what gets me out of the way and makes me not there. So that's the essence of humility. Doesn't mean that I don't accept that maybe I have a nice voice and I could lead services, or I'm good at investments, so I can help people with their investments. I'm good at teaching kids, so I should be a bar mitzvah tutor. Doesn't mean I'm not going to use my talents, but I'm going to say they're not my talents, they're talents God gave me. So they're directly related, that because Moshe was humble, Moshe was so powerful in terms of yira and das, of recognizing that it's all God, and also vice versa, because Moshe had this das, Moshe was the most humble person. And we can channel that as well our little inner Moshe. And it's not that the Alter Rebbe is saying, boom, it turns on for everybody. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about that each of us is different, and each of us, as we'll see this chapter, may need to do a little more, a little less to engage that inner Moshe.
Each according to the intellectual capacity of his soul and its root above. That is, according to the height of the source of the soul as it exists above.
All right, so we're not going to get into all the details of the levels of a soul and the different worlds and where our souls are rooted, but there's a large variety. Some souls that come out still looking at the world and seeing basically godliness and spirituality. Some souls that get processed and come out all the way down. Basically, the physical world is their normal consciousness, and I look out and it's a physical cup. It's not godliness. So the vast majority of people like me are just, you're living in the physical world and you're working on this level, doing amazing work. But depending on the degree of my soul, this will be very, very easy for me, or it might take some application. V'nikata mishoresh nishmat Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom hamushreshet bedat elyon shebiyut sfirot datzilut hamichadot b'matzilan baruch hu.
And according to the degree of its nurture from the root of the soul of our teacher Moses, peace unto him, which is rooted in the Dat Elyon, supernal knowledge of the 10 Sfirot of Atzilut, which are united with their emanator.
I love this little line. This is just so much in here, right? So first of all, I'm going to experience this dot more easily to the extent that my soul comes from a higher root and the extent that my soul is more consciously and directly connected to Moshe. So some people just, you know these people, they're just spiritual and suddenly everything they see inspires them and they're full of spiritual emotions. God bless them, and this chapter is a little easier for them, right? Some people are lower down, and now it's going to take the kind of focus we've been learning of sitting and meditating. For instance, the meditation from the beginning of chapter 41, that God fills the world and God is standing, looking right at me, expecting me, and needing me to serve in the best way possible. And that will make me at least have as much awe as I would driving with a police officer right behind me. Or at least as much awe, as we said, as the way I speak when there's a delivery person at my door, and I'm not being inappropriate with the people in my house while there's someone standing looking right at me. Not that I have fear for this delivery person, but I'm higher functioning because I'm on display, so to speak. So we should at least have that level of awe. But then he goes a little further and he says, Dat Elyon, the dot that Moshe comprises, that is not a separate created emotional flow from God. Right? When you go in the spiritual world, it's Bria down, as we've discussed. Bria means creation, and everything below creation, yes, it's godliness, but it's got a vessel and it's got a light. And the vessel is sort of like a created thing. Right? So chesed in the world of Asiya, it has a vessel which is chesed and it's not other things. And then the light, that pure light, goes into that vessel. But the vessel in the lower worlds, has its own beingness, it's separate. Not so in Atzilus. And we've said this, but in Atzilus, there's just something different where the vessels and the lights, they're all united perfectly with godliness. And there is no, you can't say that dot in Atzilus, I can point at it and say, there it is, and it's separate from godliness. It's all completely united. So whereas my emotions are definitely mine, and I can say, I'm pointing at them and they're a separate thing, I gotta work to feel like they're part of the oneness. Moshe's das is completely united with God. So when we connect to das through Moshe, we're not just connecting to a higher, more powerful form of das like the one I have. I'm actually connecting to God, directly to God. And my das is being immersed in God's actual das, which is united with God. So it's not just a higher level or more powerful, it's an entirely different quality where now we're hooking onto this oneness through Moshe's attribute.
Do you think that Moshe, getting back to Sydney's question about Moses being the most humble person in the world, You think he was so humble because of his dot, or was it because of his dot that he was so humble?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
That's a good question.
It's a question.
Yeah.
Because did he become more dot worthy because he was so humble?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, I'm just going by just kabbalistic technique, right? The dot creates the emotions, so probably it's the dot that creates the yira, and that you'd say he's the most humble person because he had the greatest dot, and he was so aware of God that how can he not fear God? For him it was a small thing, right? So
following up on that, for us,
yeah,
Rashas, is it more important to be humble, and that would create more dot within us?
Is it more important to be humble than what? Or just that makes it more important?
That makes it more important.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So if I'm full of pride, God forbid, if I'm full of pride, then none of this happens, right? And if I'm approaching this saying like, oh look at what a great Jew I am, look at how much I know much more than David over there, then basically I'm it's all bouncing off my head. It's all just going, it's all just staying as intellect, and I haven't started to do the work. So for sure, yeah, it's key that we be humble in the sense that we recognize all our emotions come from above, that we recognize I'm working on myself and I'm not judging other people. I recognize that every soul I meet, as we learn in 32, I don't know how great their soul is. I might assume they're a loftier soul than me. All that is if they don't have that, then none of this is going to really land. Yeah. And one last piece, which is, it's related, but it's beautiful. So we often refer to God as the creator, right? God is the creator, that's a common name. Look at the term he used for God here in this. Can someone find it? As a term like creator, yeah, Delta Rabbi used, but you probably never heard God referred to by that. Emanator. Thank you, the emanator. Have you said, blessed be the emanator who, et cetera, right? Have we ever used that in any text? And yet, if you think about it, I can use my mic as a paperweight. I hope that doesn't affect things. Hold on. It's a bit of an aside, but two created beings, God is the creator. So we're all created beings. Everything that exists from Bria down is a created being. And so for most of the universe, God is the creator. But what about the creatures in the world of Atzilus? Because Atzilus is the world before there is such a thing called creation. Atzilus is just oneness emanated by God. Right? So we say there's beings there, but they're not created beings. They're emanated beings, and they're completely one with godliness. So for them, they say, blessed be Matzilan, my emanator, not my creator. And that word Matzilan, it's so beautiful that you recognize there's a different way of looking at the world where God's not even a creator, because those beings are so united with God, they can't even conceive of there being a creator. There's only an emanator. And that's the word he used here, where he's talking about the level that Moshe has in terms of dot. That for Moshe, there really isn't a creator. Moshe's dot is one with godliness, and what's creation, right? So that's why Moshe must have been such a powerful teacher, where you just sat and learned Torah from him. He's explaining about how many strands should be on tzitzit. But for him, as we'll learn, it's just godliness. There's no creation. There's no strings. There's no world. He's still up there in the world where he's aware that there's only godliness with no possibility of even a secondary created being. So all that one word he used here in this paragraph, I find it like... Questions about that? And I'm sorry I can't respond in real time to anyone with us on Facebook. Normally we add comments, but if you add comments, I'll try and answer after the fact. I'll try and review, or on YouTube as well.
For he and his knowledge are one, and he is the knowledge.
So as we learned, God is the knower, the known, and the knowledge. So with us, those are components, separate, right? There's me, there's math, and there's how I learn math. With God, if God knows something, that can never be separate from God. With God, all the midot are united completely, and God is the one who knows, and the way to know, and the thing being known, all united with no components, no distinctions. And we can't understand that. But that was, Moshe's dot was at that level. So when I connect with Moshe's dot, now I'm actually uniting with God.
Could this lead people to believe that Moses is a god? And
God
pray
forbid,
to
right?
him?
Okay. So yeah, so that you always got to make that distinction, right? So let me make it simpler, right? Is God in this pencil? Yeah, God's everywhere, right? Every child has God's in this pencil. Does that mean I can pray to this pencil? God forbid, right? So that applies to everything, right? We know even let mind Moshe, great souls, right? We revere Moshe, we learn from Moshe, we turn to Moshe for inspiration, we draw from Moshe for dot. But if someone sits down and says, God bless, and puts his name in there, they get stoned, right? Just like they would if they bow down for this pencil in biblical times, right? That's idol worship. So it's just a clear distinction all the way down. The only thing that's worshipped is God, absolute unified essence. And you can't worship the Sfirot, even though you're united with God. You can't worship Moshe, even though Moshe is united with God. As we'll learn, we're about to see, the same thing applies in a small degree to the heads of our community in every generation. But also, you can't worship them, God forbid, or you're leaving Judaism. You're setting somebody up as an idol, right? So there's a difference between revering someone and connecting to someone and relying on somebody versus, God forbid, praying to them. Yeah? So you'll see there's a first step of us engaging dots so that my emotions are full and flowing, and that is connecting to Moshe, because Moshe is the shepherd that provides dot. But now there's a second stage of 3 that we're going to cover, probably just 2 today, which is, okay, I can learn Torah from Moshe, and that's amazing, but Moshe is not here right now, so yeah, you can do this through books, and in fact, as you'll learn, this is something that people do with the Tanya to connect with the Alter Rebbe and the other Rebbes of Chabad. But Moshe is not here, right? So am I at a disadvantage now that forever I can only connect to Moshe through what Moshe taught? The Alter Rebbe is going to say, the way the structure of the Jewish people is, every generation is a complete body. Every generation is a single being, and we're all like cells in one body, even though we look different. If we were blood cells in someone's circulatory system, we'd also be separate cells with my cell wall and your cell wall, and one cell could be generated, another could pass away, and I'd say that cell's not here anymore, and that one was different than me, but all my cells are part of me, right? So same thing with the Jewish people. That each one of us is part of a single body and is connected to that body, and the head of that body is the highest soul, or the collection of highest souls in the generation. And what he'll say is each one of those has a spark of Moshe that is in it. And specifically look at the word spark, because spark is an interesting word. It's not a ray, it's not a flow. So you and I will get a ray or a flow from Moshe's dot within us, or a beam of light, so to speak. This is an actual spark. So if I look at a fire, I got this fire that we're all warming ourselves from, and we're getting light from the fire, and that's a radiation from the fire, but it's not the fire itself, it's something coming from the fire. So all of us are getting light from the fire, but when you get one of those pops, and the spray of sparks come out, that spark, is it a ray from the fire? It's an actual piece of the fire itself. Like a part of the fire came out, and it's a spark. It's the actual same thing as the fire, but now it's outside the fire. So when he talks about the heads of the generations and connecting to them, we want to understand that in the structure that Kabbalah teaches about the Jewish people, the heads of the generation, they are an actual spark that's a piece of Moshe's soul that comes down to our generation. And much more powerfully, when we connect to them, that allows us to connect to the sense of dot as well, and godliness. And they might not be the most brilliant people of the generation, right? There might be people that are much more knowledgeable in Torah and teach Torah at a higher level, but there's something about what we call a tzaddik, what we call a very, very righteous person that's godly, that even their physical bodies, we'll see, there's something about it that just, it's connected to godliness, even though they're here in the physical world. You don't worship them, God forbid, so don't get uncomfortable, right? We're going to be clear. But when, the Alter Rebbe will say, when I connect to those tzaddikim of this generation, that is the second part of how I can fully engage in my mini Moshe within me. So let's go through as the Alter Rebbe says it. ועוד זאת יתר כן בכל דור ודור יורדים ניצוצין מנשמת משה רבינו עליו השלום ומתלבשים בגוף ונפש של חכמי הדור עיני העדה.
In addition and beyond this pervasive influence to the community as a whole, there descend in every generation sparks from the soul of our teacher Moses, peace unto him, and they clothe themselves in the body and the soul of the sages of that generation, the eyes of the congregation.
And so we've looked at this in the past, but this may be something that feels foreign to us as Reformed Jews, especially as American Jews, for whom we live in a democratic society. Everybody's equal. Everybody has equal rights. So, in many ways, this flies against us. But let me put out for consideration: every phenomenon in the world has a structure and has kind of a central point around which that structure is organized. Every living thing. So, your body, you have eyes, you have a brain, and you have fingernails. And I can cut my fingernails off, but God forbid anything happens to my brain and my eyes like that's a catastrophe. It's every living thing is organized that way. And I want to use my brain and my heart and my eyes to direct my body. I don't want to just have my feet walk wherever they feel like walking, right? I use my eyes to check and make sure my whole body's safe. Same thing with a tree, same thing with the earth. Everything is organized around some central point that is organizing its structure. So, yeah, politically I get that in America we want everyone to be equal. That's amazing. But in Kabbalah, we might understand that there is an organic structure to the Jewish people, and that every person has infinite value, but that not everyone is at the same level in that structure. And some are the eyes, and some are the brain, and some are basically the soles of the feet. And yet, we all have the same infinite value because we're all part of this one being called the Jewish people. But just like if I want that cup, my brain has to ask my hand to go get the cup because my hand's closer to the cup. If you want to connect with this Dat Elyon, in this tradition, it helps to go to that head of the generation that really is a spark of Moshe and is closer and has access to that and can be a channel for that flow to you. Right? Again, not that you worship them, but that they have access to it in a way that I don't. And I'm part of something that receives its vitality from that flow that goes through that head of the generation. Let me try this one with a story too about the Shpola Zeta, who's another big Rebbe, and it was a student of the Maggid of Mizrich, so it was a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. Many people would assume that a Rebbe, which is here in this system what he's talking about having a Rebbe, which doesn't mean Rebbe is not colloquial for rabbi. Rebbe is SCUBA is a acronym? No. Acronym? It's an acronym. Rebbe is an acronym for Rosh B'nai Yisrael. Exactly what we're talking about. Reish is Rosh, Beit is B'nai, Yud is Yisrael. That's an acronym for Rebbe. And so Rebbe is not a cute Yiddish way of saying my rabbi. A Rebbe is something specific. They may not be as smart as someone that teaches me a specific topic. They may. But what they are is they're one of the heads of the people of Israel, and they're one of the people that has a spark of Moshe within them. And you don't necessarily go to them to learn Torah. You go to them to be connected to Dat. And you notice the Alter Rebbe said here that spark clothes itself in the body and soul of the heads of generation. Why is body even in there, and why body first? It's because everything about one of these tzaddikim, one of these heads of the people of Israel, it emanates faith in God. It emanates this Dat that we're talking about, this connection that Torah is godliness, mitzvot are godliness. And so connecting to one of these Rebbes was not about learning something better. It was about making things apparent, making the abstract concepts that I prepared for myself, making them so real, as we say, that when I go home now, it's easy to have awe and love to do the right thing all the time. Because people say, when you're in the presence of one of these tzaddikim, it's just, massive aha moment where you just say, this is not what I thought it was, and there's nothing else that has power over me other than the Ein Sof, and there's no other power in the world, and so why should I be afraid, and why should I ever do the wrong thing? And then you leave in that heightened state, and you hopefully keep that in your life. So to sum that up, Reb Shmuel Munkus was going to see the Maggid Mizrich, and the Shpoel Zeta said, he said, my colleagues go to see the Rebbe, the Maggid Mizrich, to learn Torah from him, but I don't do that. I go to my Rebbe, the Maggid Mizrich, to see how he ties his shoes. And this is like one of the holiest tzaddikim of his time. This is a massive, massive intellect. This is a guy who would go to the ends of the earth to free a captive Jewish person that was held in prison for a debt of some kind. So this big tzaddik, and obviously he understood that the Maggid Mizrich was one of the greatest minds of his time as well. But what he found beautiful about the Maggid was just even his physical being was so full of that spark of Moshe that the world was godliness, Torah was godliness, and it wasn't about a halacha that you learned. It was just now that halacha was united with God, and that filled everything he did with godliness, such that he could go and serve his community better. So it might be a little foreign for us, but the way we can do this, we did start the Tanya with this, saying that the Alter Rebbe said in his time he had so many Hasidim that he couldn't do Yechidus anymore. He couldn't do personal audiences anymore. And he said, I'm writing this book because everything I tell people in Yechidus, I'm summarizing it in this book. All the problems that you come to me with, I'm going to give you tools to overcome them. All the inspiring messages I give to my Hasidim when they're here with me, I give to them. And more than that, I'm going to say that this is my real being. Because as a tzaddik, my real being is my Torah. It's not my body. And when you learn Tanya, you're having Yechidus with me. So for us, the way that we can do this is simply understanding that's how the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya. And as we go through these chapters, we're in fact having a Yechidus with one of these heads of the generation. And we can absolutely draw vitality from that flow from Moshe by connecting with the Alter Rebbe through the Tanya. That's I hope the intention with which I've been teaching this course, that we're not just learning information, but that we're connecting with one of the heads of this time, of our generation, and through that connecting to Moshe and changing everything. So this is about me and how I can serve Temple Israel and elevate everything around us. And so we finished with a quick meditation. So let's put this somewhat into practice. If you're at home or if you're joining us in the future, just find yourself in a comfortable position. We don't need complex positions as part of this meditation. It's a little simpler. Let's take in the beautiful sounds that are around us, and the sounds of the wind and the nature, or the sounds wherever you are. Take in what your eyes are seeing behind your closed eyelids. Take in the feel of the air and the clothing hanging on your skin, and the feel of the chair you're seated on beneath you. Let's slow your breathing down. You're going to do 4 counts of 4 for each stage of the breath cycle. That would be 4 for breathing in, 4 to keep that delicious breath inside, 4 for breathing out, and 4 remaining nice and empty before you breathe in again. Starting with me, breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the breath in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing back out, 2, 3, 4. Keep the breath empty, 2. Let's go again. If you can, breathe through your nose, breathing 2, 3, 4. Mouth closed. Keep that breath in, 2, 3. Through the nose, back out, 2, 3, 4. Nice and still, 2. Start over in your own pace, breathing in. You probably have already noticed some emotional changes, some spiritual changes inside, a evening of the playing field, broadening of the mind. There's many, many physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual benefits to just this practice, doing it 10, 20 minutes a day. Now we're going to open up our wisdom gateway, our focus for bringing in divine light. So between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath, there's a space, an opening. That will be our wisdom gateway as we've been practicing. Let that gap open up and form out of it in your mind a wisdom gateway, visually, in terms of sound. Be standing in front of that gateway, waiting for the light that will come through it. Let's put in that wisdom gateway a sense of the dot from Moshe within me. I have a flow of that dot that connects directly to God's essence. That divine concept that my dot connects to Moshe's dot. And through that I'm one with the Ein Sof. Whatever that looks like, hold that in your mind's eye. Let that meditation fill your entire mind, leaving no room for anything else. Yeah? So in Eastern meditation, if you have a distracting thought, you focus on the thought until it goes away or resolves. In this meditation, if there's a distracting thought, just fill that space in your mind with your initial contemplation. You want to fill the mind up with this divine concept, like a cup filled to the brim with wine. You'll find perhaps much easier than the Eastern pathway, just filling your mind with a divine concept. Surrendering your mind to that concept. And perhaps, as we said, if you feel a sense of humility, a sense of awe flowing out of this meditation, be aware of that as well. So as I do this, I'm making these abstract concepts real to me. I'm making this about my own life. I'm giving myself the tools to elevate everything around me in the most beautiful way. And if you're at home, please feel free to pause our video and meditate in this posture for 10-20 minutes if you like, keeping that divine focus. If not, you can open your eyes, wiggle your hands and toes. How nice to be here with you on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. We're outside in our tent, so like I said, if you'd like to join us, just email Maya at temple-israel.org. She's happy to send you the schedule. You can join us. We plan to be out here as long as technically we can and the weather cooperates, so we'd love to have you with us. Thanks for joining. Good? Ah, very good. Okay.
I know sometimes we always get back to this.
Yeah.
But Moses
We can stop this is probably going to be more personal. Thanks.
Moses was humble.
Yeah.
We strive ourselves to be more humble, but in the beginning, you have to be born with an ego.
Say it again. You have to be what? Ego?
In the beginning, you have to be born